Gentlemen, we are alive and well. Here it is, a Wednesday, March 4th, 2020, and this year has been a decade already. A wild ride. Today we're going to be asking the question, are we in a global pandemic? As the WHO seems to not be able to provide us any valuable information, and the CDC falls short of anything useful at all. So for our own purpose and sake, I decided to go over these questions ourselves. This is just conjecture. Please remember that this is in no way, shape, or form health, medicinal, financial, or any other type of advice. This is strictly for I guess conjecture and educational purposes only. Take from it what you will. You can trust the WHO and the CDC, but from what they have been putting out, they seem to be more worried about the names of these things as well as how people feel about whether we're in a pandemic or not. Although I guess as we will lead into over the next half an hour here, there is probably a reason why they are acting so coy. So with that in mind, I'm going to throw you the logo and let's dive right in. Okay, so right out the get-go, what we're going to do today, yesterday, I think keeping track of this information on a day-to-day basis is important. I've thought so actually since the beginning of January, but I didn't want to appear to cry wolf had this become contained in its early days. Now, as we move further and further into this, it is more and more likely that it is a uncontainable and B, a global pandemic. So the question of what to do and how to prepare is going to become, I think, of the utmost importance. So I want to thank you guys all for joining us today, taking this time to learn as much as you can and be prepared, because it is not just our lives that are potentially in the crossfire here. What we want to be able to do is make sure that we can slow down this crazy beast from moving as fast as it does, because at the best, we won't get an overwhelmed hospital system. But what does that mean for the markets? What does that mean for yourself on a day-to-day basis? These are going to become increasingly more, I guess, more pertinent for people to understand. You know, for myself as a trader, as an investor, to be able to stay at home and work has been something I've relied on for a long time. Other people need to go to work to maintain that livelihood, and they do not have the financial means to take care of themselves. We know, as a matter of fact, most Americans are in debt. And if you have $10 or more and no debt, you're actually considered in the top 15% of the wealthy of the United States, because most people don't just have nothing, they have negatives weighing on them. So we see the Federal Reserve has actually come out and cut rates. I hate when the New York Times does that. They always want you to sign up for these accounts. Assholes, they're just useless. At least make it free, and then if I can sign up for something like special, you know? So the Fed might have to cut interest rates all the way to zero. They did drop it, I believe, 25 basis points yesterday. Don't quote me on that one. It could have been 50 for all I know. And from that moment, we actually saw a nice little spike here in the S&P 500 with an immediate decline. Again, this is what we suspected would be taking place. They're going to try to ramp the markets up. We're going to see a type of regrowth back up into the coming months. But from there, I think having at least positions with the VIX, being short whatever financial assets you may be holding, at least as a leveraged hedge. Again, not shorting where you could liquidate yourself, but at least where you will reimburse yourself some of the downside by having that short. We will make videos on how to do that, how to weigh those risks versus your portfolio size with some flat numbers. But in the next steps here, I want to again, go back to this main page, just quickly roll through them. All of you guys can find this information yourself, so I don't want to spend too much time in it. But you have over 94,000 confirmed cases. And then, more importantly, it's the growth here in Korea has found a nice little bit of a slowdown. Iran just smashing numbers. Same with Italy here. I think you're going to see that in Japan, actually, which has done a great job managing to contain this so far as well. But countries like Germany, France, Spain, the United States, and Singapore, well, maybe not Singapore, and this is another great question, but these countries all seem to be on the next steps to becoming endemic, which means inside of that country, you have community spread and the numbers are increasing. I think that becomes more and more apparent as we go through the rest of the news here. Again, another great look at this is worldometers.info/coronavirus. I don't want to go into that data so much as it's not as important to the financial or market aspects on a day-to-day basis. I do, however, though, want to fucking tip my hat to Costa Rica, because this is very interesting to see. Costa Rica is already putting up signs and recommending that businesses and schools do the same thing, indicating proper hand washing, sneezing, and coughing methods. Businesses should disinfect all doorknobs, wash bin handles. These guys are taking steps, and there are no current infections here already. I'm very impressed by Costa Rica as a country. We have no military. We have a high medical healthcare standard, and the government in these situations puts up at least the proper idea to say, hey, you know what, guys, this could be a big deal. We're not totally equipped to handle the downsides of this, so let's try to make our best asserted motherfucking effort to take care of it before it runs rampant. Whereas in the United States, you see nothing but idiocy. And same in Canada. The remarks of the people that I see that should be well educated and not believing the mainstream media that are comparing this to the flu or comparing this to anything that we've ever fucking motherfucking seen before is mind-boggling to me. It does not make any sense to do that. It is less of a cost to be over-prepared in this situation than it is to just fucking ignore it. So you have to excuse my fiery voice here. I'm sure the YouTube algorithm does not like that, but it is important. Again, I know that I am not the one at risk, but what we can do is at least slow this baby down so that way the risks of the infection on the long term helps those people that do have to go to the critical care unit and might be saved from the hospital if it is not overwhelmed. Again, the Costa Rica, just a few more hats off to them here. This is what all the countries should be doing. This is what Singapore and South Korea have done. Churches should actually, rather than use things directly with their hands and mouths, they should avoid physical contact when sharing a greeting of peace. And none of the other countries are saying that. We should be really distancing ourselves. Anyone feeling ill is recommended stay home and avoid large-scale gatherings. As a matter of fact, countries are already canceling those gatherings. So both of Costa Rica's international airports and major ports have developed specific steps in treating the possible coronavirus case. And as a matter of fact, we have already tested over 180 cases in Costa Rica alone. That is a hard number to imagine when, as you see in the United States, it's only 500. How have we tested half of the amount in the United States is when there's only 6 million people here? Costa Rica is doing a fantastic job. And again, their Ministry of Health says we'll treat suspected cases of coronaviruses as confirmed. Another smart thing to do here. This is not the time to be reactionary. And that's what's been so fucking devastating, I think, about what the WHO and the CDC has done. And I think I know why they're doing it. I think they know that in general, and I apologize for anyone out there who might be American or in the first world country, but I think they've realized that most of those people are kind of stupid. So if you scare them a little bit, they're already going to stress a potentially deadly economic supply strain, right? And that's the point that we have to understand here, is that part of this devastation doesn't come just from the virus. It comes from the economic effects. And as a show that focuses, fairly heavily on value and wealth and richness, understanding the consequences of these downturns, these black swans, and how they play out is extremely important. So as a long time resident of Costa Rica here, I just want to give my hats off to these guys, because they are doing what the American or the United States should be doing. They should be taking proactive measures to stop the spread of this virus instead of being reactionary. So I just wanted to do that, as I'm really excited about that. The WHO also just came back recently from their visit to Wuhan, and we do know that they were not critically allowed in all the areas of their visit as well. So again, the reason why I think this information is important is because normally we would just be going over market sentiments. But part of this is not the need to understand that preparedness is less of a cost than no reaction or a reactionary measure. And that is, right, I would rather be laughed at for having, like, I just brought an extra fridge up. I'm doubling down on all the food in the greenhouse. I would rather be laughed at for having more fucking food in my house and extras of everything that I might need for the 6 months ahead of me than the unprepared nature of, this will just blow over. It's like all the other pandemics. You should almost, in fact, always be prepared for those things. And our ancestors were a lot of the times prepared. When winter was coming, they had stocks of food. In the early 1900s, when we had the Spanish flu and the pandemic, We already had a society that was pretty fucking good at self-quarantining themselves. They were self-sustainable as it was, right? So what happens to our society if you see that economic supply chain kink could be devastating to the numbers of people that end up in a critical care unit. So I will leave the links for this Reddit article because, again, what we're trying to do here is give you the information that's valuable enough to say, hey, this is serious. I should be taking this seriously. Anyways, I'll move on from that because that was all that article is for, really. An Amazon employee tests positive for coronavirus. Now, what I like about this story is, again, the understanding that Amazon is one of the biggest tech giants, is going to have to deal with something, this upside-down deal, one they don't want to deal with, I'm sure, is the fact that we now know the coronavirus can live on cardboard boxes, essentially, for up to 9 days, right? So if someone gets sick in the warehouse, they don't know, they're asymptomatic, transmitting maybe for like 20 days before, they infect the boxes and they move on, and they're definitely within the United States within 9 days. This could be a game changer for some of the tech industry. And again, we don't have enough valid evidence yet. That's why what we do have, I mean, I shouldn't even share the WHO's data, but what we do have from good sources so far, like the New England Journal of Medicine around the coronavirus, how long these things can stick around on the surface for, is actually a lot longer than the flu. Like, everything about this is way worse than the flu. So responding to it properly is responding to it as it's a crisis. I believe we are in a global crisis, and we should be fucking acting like adults here. And that means doing things to be ahead of the curve, to educating ourselves about what we need to do. So we dive in here. I'm just going to take a look at these numbers. Sorry, I skipped over. Yes. Okay. So this was when it becomes self-evident. I thought this was an important little juxtaposition. One of my, someone I enjoy reading and listening to quite frequently, Tim Ferriss, came out and said, after much thought today, I've canceled my attendance at South by Southwest. I love this conference, but I do believe the novel coronavirus cannot be contained. And I view an international event of 100,000 people as a huge risk to its attendees and the entire city, given limited ICU beds. And again, this is the proper sentiment. It's not fear-based. It is using the data that is relative to us and making an intelligent decision based off of this. It's really, really interesting to see those that don't understand that, the importance of the nature of these events, especially, I guess I can use this Reddit post for something here. Look, here I am in the 30 to 39 age group category. Not a big deal, right? You know, that's I'm doing good. 0.2% fatality rate. I'm gonna kill it. There's like out of every 100 people, not even a whole one dies, right? That's great. You have to have at least 500 people die before you have one person in that age category pass away. So not that high of a number. And it's not the first wave of this pandemic we're worried about. It's the second, for those who've done the study. So the importance of these sentiments here is that we just want to slow this pandemic down as best as possible to make sure that we have as much time to figure our fucking shit out. I still don't, ladies and gentlemen, I still don't understand how that's not just the regular course of action. It seems so easy to understand. Anyways, I didn't want to open this, but Alibaba says its new AI system can detect coronavirus in seconds. I did not read through this. I apologize. I actually didn't mean to leave it here. But again, what's interesting here and the correlation I'm trying to make is these tech companies are going to be looking at ways to not just test patients, but potentially test their own areas. Because if they start to take news hits like, someone gets coronavirus from a shipped product, just think about how much the Corona's stock has probably fallen just from the nomenclature here having an even relevant terminology, right? Coronavirus and Corona beer. Coronavirus's effects on the Corona beer company have probably been devastating for that company because that's how people think. So I'm sure they're going to go through everything possible to bring in their own detection systems. Again, stark contrast to what the United States have been doing. It's like, we won't even really test. I don't believe the numbers that we're getting out of there are real at all. And again, the positive thing here is that we can hope that the asymptomatic transmission is actually quite high, and that you get maybe 80% of the people, or maybe that'd be fantastic. 80% of the people, let's say it's all of China had already had it, right, to reach those numbers. Like, come on, let's do the math. It would be in the hundreds of millions of people. then the CFR, or the death rate, would be reduced drastically. But that's not what we're seeing. We're seeing a pretty stable case fatality rate of above 2%. And that does classify us as a Category 5 pandemic crisis by the CDC fucking website, who is telling everybody to do the exact opposite of their own written hand manuals for these crisis level indicators. And again, that's where the break comes from. They know if they scare a bunch of people, they're going to break the thing that they're trying to save. And that's why the reason they're acting so fucking ignorant is because they assume, I believe, that people are stupid. And that's sad. Whereas in Singapore, South Korea, they're taking measures. Same with in Costa Rica. They're doing it properly. They're telling people, don't go to large gatherings. Don't fucking shake hands. This should be so important. Anyways, big numbers coming out of Iran as well. 23 of the MP's senior health official test positive for the illness after probably thinking the same thing along the lines of the United States does. This could very, very quickly affect all of the working parties of the government in the country that you live, which would leave the country. Look, for as much as we don't like governments, and how much I'm giving like a few of them props right now, because Costa Rica's done a good job of trying to help educate people around these situations. When those start to break down, those offer not just a lot of jobs, but a lot of critical care infrastructure, from your electricity, waste management, even internet contracts are held up somewhat by the trade commissions that are in that area. If those break down, ladies and gentlemen, this goes from being a pandemic to something much, much worse. And that's why I think the CDC is trying to treat everyone like children instead of treat them like informed adults, is because they're worried that informed adults might break the system. I've talked to friends from many different parts of the United States and all over the world now who said, well, yeah, we're starting to see shortages in our grocery stores. It is important to be prepared. Taking the last minute to prepare, we're in those last minutes now. Don't do it all at once. Just try to be more effective. Toilet paper, who cares? Wash your ass with water or grass. Use a leaf. Not that important. You'll figure it out if you have to. As I live in the jungle here, I've had a lot of experience figuring out what the fuck you need to do if you're in the middle of the jungle and you ain't got no goddamn toilet paper. You're going to fucking figure out a smarter solution. Please, to God, do not use poison ivy. At least have a general understanding then of the plants that are in the nature around you. That's so much easier to do than so many plants here you could use to wipe your ass. Anyways, whatever, doesn't matter, but it does. And I think being informed is always going to create better educated decisions, but it's not necessarily the virus that's the real kicker here. It could be the supply chain and the governmental breakdown. So again, seeing these 23 Iranian MPs break down, succumb to the virus, I think that is a marker and a flag for what this is going to do to other countries and their governments as we move forward. Lastly, I wanted to go into Australia as well. More ideas leading into the potential of community spread. Again, the reason I think this is important is because once you have community spread, this seems to start to double its numbers every few days. So where Australia is in I think the 100 now, it will go into the 100,000s, etc. over the coming weeks. So just to be well aware of what's on the doorstep. Again, just the Fed cutting rates, which is useless CNN business as well. Again, guys, the point of today's video, at least at this particular moment, was just to go over everything. And I want to remind everyone that I think that the reason why I want to do this is because I think there's a level of understanding that this is a crisis that we need to pay attention to. So I'm going to take a look at your few questions. I know this had nothing to do with markets today. And I know I'm probably not going to ever get popular for the coronavirus updates. The point here is I think it's so important. If it wasn't important, I wouldn't be making videos about it. There's so many funner things I would rather be making videos about because it's good to do so, like turmeric tea. And maybe I'll start to mix it up with more of the health benefits and the potentials of, hey, make sure you're eating vitamin C, getting sunlight on a daily basis, doing some fucking Wim Hof breathing, just get that oxygen in the bloodstream too. Anyways, take a look at a few of your guys' questions. I know it's early in the day. And also remember, smash that thumbs up button. Send me an email if you have any data you want me to see, and then we'll go from there. Let's take a look. Crazy Kangaroo says, things are getting crazy in Australia. Already shop shelves are empty. Toilet paper is nearly sold out. Crazy overreaction here. Yeah, I agree. And I think that's why everyone's worried about the supply chain. Because if you break that, it's much, much worse. Much, much worse than the virus ever could be. And that's what it looks like is going to happen because of the continual spread here and the high R naught. It just has all the markers of, oh, yep, we're going to have to deal with this. Everyone who wants to shake hands, don't know how to tell them it's not sensible. Yeah, from now on, we are no longer shaking hands. I think a foot kick is even almost in order just to keep that extra few feet away. Lone Wolf says, I heard someone say that the U.S. Army / government is preparing the virus to have 2 to 3 million deaths in like 6 months. Let's take a look at the numbers here, Lone. That's a great thought. So I know I'm just going to make this up, but it's about approximately 500 million people that live in the United States times 0.2, right? That would leave us with approximately, wait, is that 100? 500 million times 0.02. That's around 10 million deaths. So yeah, that sounds about right. The U.S. government should be technically preparing for around 10 million deaths in the next, let's say 18 months. Let's just give it a far out let's give it a far out. And again, so for those of you that know, our annual death rate is around 54 million a year globally. Like that's the whole global average. So for all of a sudden, the United States to bear the brunt of a fifth of that is significantly higher than normal. That is not an average death toll for a country to have to deal with. So it is noticeable. Anyone who's downplaying that, I think, is going to find their own. They're going to find their own tail so far up their mouth soon. They're going to be eating what tastes worse than shit. So I think, again, the downside to not being prepared here. Way heavier of a cost than it is to just be proactive and be laughed at for the guy who had always had 6 months of water and food in the storage shelter. I think that's smart. Let's see. Lone Wolf says, it can mutate. That's a great question and a great thought. I'll lead to that one here too. My friend says, I know the Amazon employee. He went to work. His kids went to school. Yeah, exactly. And that's what we call community spread. Ganesh says, hi everyone, hope everyone is having a great day. Thanks Ganesh, I appreciate that. Love the support. Hope that everyone is having a great day. So Lone Wolf, back to the it can mutate idea. Yeah, generally it does, but it usually becomes less deadly in those situations because it's better for itself to not kill off the host. So a lot of the times when we have seen lengthy mutations, it is to the benefit of the CFR in its reduced rate so that it actually stays alive. The higher the fatality rate, the less likely it becomes transmissible because not that many people are hanging out with dead bodies. Point in case. Let's see. CDC has blood on their hands. I agree with this as well. They're just done such a horrible job. Biggest problem right now is how politicized the virus has become. Yeah, nobody's digging in to find the research, and that's why, for what little difference it might make, we jump on, we do this show, and we let everyone know that hey, I'm getting prepared, like I'm in the greenhouse, a second fridge now, and this is what that is for. It's like, okay, well, let's go into lockdown for. Why not? I'm in the perfect spot to do it in Costa Rica. It's very likely. I live in the middle of nowhere. Like, I'm super safe, and I'm, like, doubling down. And I'm in the middle, like, I have nobody living around me for acres. Like, it's great. I look out the window, and I see 5 fucking houses for hundreds of kilometers of green. I was already self-quarantined. There's a 30-foot tall gate with an armed guard tower. Everyone's stacked out here in the jungle, and it was on purpose for years. I think for a reason. This has always been a worry that the supply chain would break, and being self-sufficient seemed always like a good fucking idea. Anyways. So Mark Carter, beliefs are a bad idea. Yeah, that's not true. If you've ever lived in the jungle or had to work out in the bush, it's sensible to know what plants are valuable around you. It's case in point. If you want to argue that one, I can think that you've already lost. France and Germany are not allowing to buy masks. Actually, they're not allowing the export of any of their medical equipment anymore. And I think that's another thing, is the supply chain is really going to start to bar itself off from one another. How do you get sunlight in winter? You could go to a tanning bed. The UVA and B rays do emit some of the same similar frequencies. And Wendell's makes a case in point here. You can just take vitamin D. Great way to go there. Marlon S. says, I actually wiped my ass with poison ivy once, handpicked by my cousin. Not recommended. Yeah, there are other leaves that would work just fine. A little bit of water, you're good to go. Oh, look, paper, it's not like if you've ever lived in the bush or worked in the, when I was younger, I used to work in a forestry camp, and we would do like 3.5, 4 months out in the bush, 6 days, nothing but bush time. And, you go well prepared to wipe your ass so that you do have toilet paper. But on the off chance you don't, it's like, well, you always got a toilet or like a sleeve on your shirt. Well, this shirt has no sleeves, but you could rip the sleeve off your shirt, use that, wash it a few times. People will become resourceful in the times when they need to. Lone Wolf is saying Italy has closed all of its schools. I read not all, but I do believe a lot of these countries are going through the proactive messages, and that's smart way to go. Snake Eyes says all the virus is a hoax, fearmonger, BS media. Snake Eyes, I'm sorry, but this sentiment that you're carrying, and the same one that JSNP has, is the most ignorant fucking thing I've ever seen. It is beyond belief. Like, look, it's okay. Let's look at like the idea of like fake news, right? Maybe it's a bioweapon, maybe it's not. I don't know. And the information, whether it is or not, is unimportant to me. The information around the HIV spike proteins that we've seen, the leading up to this, the breakdowns in the Wuhan virus lab, sure, these are all anecdotal evidence pieces that we could maybe assume that this is a bioweapon. On the other hand, if it's not a bioweapon, nature is on par with trying to kill us all the fucking time. Anyways, we don't need to do anything to help it. It was doing that by itself. So even if it's just simply zoonotic, it doesn't change the case fatality rate that we see. And most of the times these viruses, as they mutate, they become less virulent. We do see tons of mutations in this thing, and they're being documented and journaled very well. So to say such a silly thing like the virus is a hoax and fearmonger BS media, that's just stupid. I think a lot of the people that think Bill Gates is at fault because of coronaviruses, these are people that are just fucking smarter than you. And it's time you accept that there are a lot of people that are fucking smarter than you, and maybe you're the retard, right? Like, I don't trust that I know everything. I just try to gather as much information as possible. As soon as you start saying these very definitive things like, oh, this is just fear-mongering and a hoax, you're the one that will look like a fool because you're opening your mouth. I'm just simply trying to share what other people are seeing, the data that's coming out. And that's a much, much different sentiment. So we'll keep our eyes on this as it grows. We will be looking into the markets tonight. We saw Matic over 50%. I'm glad that made it in the newsletter, and Link up another 7% today. So ladies and gentlemen, in the private group, you guys are killing it. I'm back full time, aside from this little cold, which has been made a little more difficult. I've doubled down. I've got backup internet. I have 2 internet connections. We're going to be updating the solar batteries too. And that's it. I'm locked down. I'm going into self-quarantine mode, but I already go to the beach and there's nobody here, so what do I care? Thank you guys for joining us today. I really appreciate all of your support. You guys, the Bear family, are such an important part of my day. I can't thank you enough for always coming back, always joining us. I know there's like a lot of the times I think to myself, well, maybe if I did like a more like put together show, or like where I documented, I just wasn't rolling around crazy all the time, that you guys would like it better. And then I think to myself, no, this is who I am. I'm kind of chaotic. I'm kind of spastic, and the information I'm providing is kind of all over the place because it's not meant to be for your own health. It's not meant to be for a financial education. I'm just showing you the shit that I'm seeing and saying, hey, isn't this weird? Or isn't this interesting? And hoping and praying to fucking God that you are all intelligent enough to do that work and empower your own critical thinking capabilities to make the decisions you need to make instead of having me or someone else tell you what to do. Here's the information. I trust that you are smart enough to know what to do with it. This is you with the Arcane Bear. I am signing off for the rest of the morning, and I will be back hopefully this evening with just a market show. I guess we'll just try doing it all over the place. You'll see some vlogs from me soon as I go back out in the garden and bring out the nice cameras. We'll send you some, that way you get some nice sweeps of the growing garden and some peaceful things too. Because look, this is not all about fear. This is about being prepared in a world that is fragile sometimes, that is precious, and life itself is always on a thin edge between you being here now and you not. So ladies and gentlemen, take that time to go out and see the loved ones you do. Tell them that you love one another, and we'll see you guys again on the other side. Oh.